Do you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
So here's our mascot. Thank you very much for joining New York Augmented Reality Meetup. It's really great to have you and seeing a lot of new and familiar faces. Especially great to see Stephen Bruce here, a previous NY presenter, Dave Johnson, Jack Feng, Neo Sun. Thank you guys all for joining New York Augmented Reality tonight. Barry and I worked really hard in putting together tonight's event, and we are really excited that you are able to join us. We really think that you're gonna love it. So tonight's agenda, first we'll take a look at the New York Augmented Reality community, mention some ways that you can get involved. Then we will review some of the latest news and industry happenings, and this will be followed by incredible presentations by Bart, Trazynadlowski, Reza, Chaji, Shuli, Sade, and Rony Abovitz, all incredible leaders in the New York Augmented Reality industry. And before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the wonderful co-organizer of the group, Barry Seff, who without this meetup would not be possible. So Barry, if you'd be interested in enlightening us with a few words of wisdom, it would be a true honor to get the chance to hear from you.
Okay. Well, thank you as usual, Andy, for doing all the heavy lifting and putting this all together. It's an amazing bunch of people we have today, and all of you that have come to partake. Yeah, as I was saying before, just appreciate everyone who you have on this planet, because the time is it's all precious. So enjoy and be safe wherever you're at, and watch for falling objects. Have a great day and great night, guys.
Thank you, Barry. And if you appreciated those words, definitely reach out to Barry on LinkedIn, where he'll put his information in the chat so you can follow up after the event. Tonight marks our 29th New York Augmented Reality event since our inception in November 2020. Since then, we've had the opportunity to host 90 incredible speakers from across the industry. And as of tonight, we crossed the line for 1,900 members in our group, an awesome accomplishment. And we're coming close to the 2,000 member milestone. All in all, making us one of the leading meetups in the augmented reality industry. So thank you all for your support. None of these events would be possible without you being here. So thanks for being part of New York Augmented Reality. Although augmented reality is an incredible industry and we recognize its potential, we also recognize that behind the rose-colored holographic glasses are isolated designers and developers looking for ways to connect. So if there's any way you'd like to participate in helping out with organizing the meetup, or if you'd like to speak at a future event or get connected with potential employers based on some of the skills that you have, or you just want to meet some other like-minded folks, definitely reach out to either me or Barry, and we'd love to get the chance to chat. Now, I'd love to take a moment to go over some of the latest industry happenings. And after my presentation, I'll do my best to share some relevant links so you can have the opportunity to review the content further if you'd like. First, I want to highlight the New York Augmented Reality App of the Month, which is Remembering AR by Disney+. It was released on September 8th, and as a counterpart to the 8-minute short film, Remembering on Disney+. And it uses augmented reality through an iOS device to bring the film's environment to your surroundings. The app uses Apple's Shazam Kit technology to recognize audio cues, and also the LiDAR sensor to enhance the experience in your environment. So that's the app of the month. Next, there's some good events going on in the next month. The display supply chain consultant Consultants is hosting the virtual AR VR display forum on September 20th, so tomorrow till the 21st. Pico's ByteDance's Pico is holding a new product announcement on the 22nd of September. In October, there's Meta Connect on October 11th. The Lightship VPS New York tour. So if you're into Niantic Lightship, they're coming to New York, and you can join their events to learn a lot about their technology and meet some of the people involved. And also there's a Snap Lens hackathon going on, and the deadline's October 20th. I'll send some of these links in the chat after if you want to take a look. Lastly, some news. EssilorLuxottica announced that they aim to bring augmented reality to their wide range of sunglasses and glasses, including Ray-Bans. They also have a partnership with the Polytech University of Milan, where they're working on an eyewear research center and have an initial investment there of over 50 million euros. So EssilorLuxottica, they are owners of a lot of sunglasses, a lot of glasses brands, and they're really focused on building smart glasses. So it'll be interesting to see what they develop. Blipper started creating some updates with their web AR APIs this month. Blip Builder, which is Blipper's web-based AR creative suite, announced that they currently have 250,000 users. And they also announced integration with Sketchfab, which enables these users to access 3D models and assets from within their project. And also Blipper released a Unity API. So if you're using Unity and you want to release web AR projects easily, you can integrate the Blipper SDK. And lastly, Vario, a previous New York augmented reality exhibitor, raised a Series D round of $40 million with investors, including Foxconn. If you were at the NYAR Columbia event, you were able to check out the XR3 headset, which is really cool and offers 12 megapixel video pass-through and LiDAR and eye tracking for foveated rendering. So that's all really cool. Thank you for listening to me. Now it's an honor to get the chance to move on to tonight's presentations, where we'll get the chance to hear from incredible industry professionals, those who are all working really hard towards turning the impossible into a reality. After each presentation, we'll have a 5-minute Q&A, so you'll get the chance to ask your question to the speakers. Feel free to post your questions in the chat throughout, where Barry and I will collate, or raise your hand and get the chance to ask it live. Now, without further ado, I'd love to introduce Bart Trazynadlowski. I don't know if I spelled that right, I'm sorry.
There's an extra A in there that shouldn't be in there, and a W that's missing.
Oh, my bad. My bad.
No worries.
Bart worked at Apple. Now he's working at Rec, which is an augmented reality sports company. Super cool, which hopefully we get the chance to learn more about tonight. Bart is interested in social AR, computer vision, artificial intelligence, and he's a really great developer, great guy, and it's really nice to have you at New York Augmented Reality. Thank you for joining.
Hey, thanks a lot, Andy, for hosting this. Let me try to share my screen real quick. Get the keynote in here. Optimize for video. And I think I'm gonna not share sound. Cool. Okay, do you guys, when I click play, do you guys see this okay? Full
Yep.
screen? Okay, cool. All right, well, my name is Bart Trazynadlowski, and I'm gonna talk about from computer vision to sports 2.0, kind of the journey that Rec has, as well as introducing, Rec itself, what it is. So again, I'm Bart, and I got started with AR way back in 2016 in New York. I used to attend meetups that centered around the HoloLens. So it's really cool to see this group, carrying on that torch of still having active meetups. I think it's one of the really cool things about New York is the kind of social community around this space. After that, I went to Apple. I basically did AR stuff there for 3 years, from 2018 to end of 2021. A lot of prototyping and thinking about like what the future of AR at that company is going to look like. And I stepped away in late September to kind of just work on my own stuff. And that takes us back to summer 2021, when I did the right after I left Apple, I did the OpenCV AI competition and I won the North America region of that. The idea was basically to use their Oak D depth cameras, which are manufactured by Luxonics. They're great depth cameras, by the way, if you haven't ever played around with them, to do something cool with like spatial AI. So what I wanted to do is recreate the Void experience at home. I don't know how many of you have tried the Void, but it was actually here in New York for a while, or there in New York. I'm not actually in New York right now. It was basically a pretty early VR experience that was quite amazing, and one of my favorite location-based experiences. You put on a VR headset, you went into like a space where all the virtual, the entire virtual world was basically mapped one-to-one to a physical construction. So like any wall that you touched in VR was a real wall, and if you saw like a virtual couch, you could actually sit on it. Everything was like mapped one-to-one and perfectly tracked, and you walk around with these like backpack computers and a VR headset, and it was just a really, really cool experience. This is showing here the Star Wars experience they had. So to do that kind of thing, what they did is they used a lot of these cameras on the left or something equivalent. So this is OptiTrack. The particular model pictured is about $5,000 per camera, and usually they take like, I mean, it's a huge number of these cameras they have to use. So you're talking like setup costs that I think are easily in the 6 figures and usually in the 7 figures, like over $1 million, to set up one of these locations, largely because of the cost of these motion tracking cameras. And these are used for like motion capture and stuff. So I thought, like, years after that, is it possible to do sort of the same thing with just off-the-shelf hardware? So here's the Oak D camera that was featured in the OpenCV competition. You can get these for $200, and there are slightly better versions for $300 and so forth. Really, really cheap, orders of magnitude cheaper. So my thinking was that with a little bit of elbow grease, it's a little bit of hard work, right? You could potentially get pretty close with computer vision. So here is a photograph of me using a simple model called Mascar CNN to detect certain objects in a room, put bounding boxes around them, and the idea would be to take let's say your existing physical space. This is a rendering of someone standing with a VR headset. Let's say you position a couple of depth cameras. Could you then kind of detect the walls and the objects and geometry of the room and kind of reskin it into something else? So like for example, here all the furniture has been replaced with just these kind of like box obstacles, and then the walls have been replaced with these other walls that show a city behind, and you're now in this kind of like virtual environment that's mapped one-to-one, allowing you to free roam around and have some sort of a Void-like experience. And it worked to an extent, and so here's a kind of a split screen capture of me and my mom playing laser tag with this. And on the left, there's like a couch that's been detected, and there's like a obstacle placed around it. And if you see the full view, we had a suitcase in between us because suitcase happened to be one of the categories that the model that I used off the shelf recognized. I didn't want to retrain it. And like here's another shot of me, and then here's the equivalent virtual shot. And it worked out pretty well. So that's kind of something that I did back in 2020, and we'll see why that's important in a little bit. It kind of led to my current the basis of like a lot of the technology of my current company, Rec. But I want to first talk about, before I get to that, is where is VR heading now? This is obviously an AR meetup. So why am I talking about VR? Well, that's because all the upcoming headsets are going to be moving to something called pass-through AR as a feature. So pass-through AR, as opposed to transparent optical AR or see-through AR or additive light AR, which is what most people are used to with things like HoloLens and other devices. The idea here is basically using cameras on the outside of the headset to bring in the world and essentially redisplay it in stereo, like on the displays. So when the device is off, you see nothing, but when you turn it on, you get that video pass through. On the left is like a shot through the lens of a Lynx R1 headset. And on the right is kind of more of a conceptual shot of like what might be possible. And there's a number of pass-through headsets already on the market. And obviously even the Quest 2 can do it to some limited extent. But there's a lot of upcoming things that are interesting. So there's a rumor that Pico will have something on the 22nd of this month. Facebook, of course, with the Quest Pro, which has already been leaked extensively, coming out next month. That's their big, kind of feature. And then there's like through Rec, we've talked to at least like 2 or 3 other vendors that we can't talk about that are prepping something for early next year as well. And why would you do this? It sounds kind of crazy. Like it sounds kind of ridiculous to like have like a video, like, projected on your eyes instead of just, trying to focus on transparent AR. And there's several advantages over transparent AR. And when I say transparent AR, I'm generally referring to waveguides, which is kind of what the industry has consolidated around. There are other transparent technologies, but none of them are really, anywhere close to the kind of form factor you can get from a waveguide and the advantages that waveguides offer. But the advantages of of pass-through AR are right now field of view for various physical reasons. Waveguides have constrained field of view, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. There's obviously incremental progress, but not very big progress on the horizon. Whereas headsets already, you're talking like 90 degrees or greater field of view. There's the opacity, which is probably one of the biggest ones. It's not transparent, so that means you can actually render things that are opaque. You can render the color black. You really have no limits on how you can represent graphics. They're not just going to be this kind of like, semi-translucent, ghostly, sort of visual, especially in like bright light, right? And lastly, also color fidelity. On the left here are two shots of HoloLens 2 that they've actually improved their waveguides since they launched, but either way, the colors are not very good. And you can see it more extremely on the left in the early versions. There's just not a lot of color uniformity. You have like, this horrible artifacting. You can see it most obviously there in the center, but if you kind of just look on the white borderline of that Windows menu, it's supposed to be white, but you can see it goes through a number of colors, magenta and so forth. And that's a huge problem with waveguides, is having that like uniformity is really, really difficult. Not as difficult with an actual like say OLED or something, display. There are also disadvantages. We won't talk about those too much. There's trade-offs here, but the industry right now, they're, for this kind of session-based, meaning like you sit down with a device for like some task, whether it's a game or whatever, there's definitely some big advantages to pass through AR. So fast forward again to February of this year. I had been away from Apple for some time doing a bunch of like random projects and demos and stuff. And I was approached by 6Live, who some of you might know from his work with Live, which is the kind of the first mixed reality capture, software that was really instrumental in propelling Beat Saber to its success, as well as YUR Fitness. And he was kind of looking for something new to do in the area of VR or AR sports. The idea being that if we could have something where you're really spectating people, then maybe you're not as dependent on the current state of the headset market, because like in sports, you have many more spectators interested and engaging with the content than you do players. And we've all kind of seen this before, right? Like in science fiction, this is obviously from Tron, this idea that like at some point in the future, you have some sort of like augmented sports, and it's just a matter of like when, and it seems like now is probably the right time. Separately, I was kind of interested in, I was a big proponent of like shared AR. So the idea of like being in the same space with somebody and doing an experience. I just think it's something that kind of solves that pain point of like isolation, in VR. So like I always think back to this like silly Facebook Horizons reveal. I don't know if you guys remember this. I think it was like 2019, when it was still Facebook. They had this kind of strange like trailer of announcing Horizons, and they had a bunch of shots of like people hanging out with their Quest, and there were other people in their household around them, but you can see like it isn't like, when you really look at it, even then it seemed to me like a very strange picture. You'd have like one person like doing something zany in a headset, and the other person just like, what is this person doing? Clearly not participating, very socially isolating, obviously. Like here you have like, the wife like playing around Horizons, and then the husband just like totally weirded out by it. And that was like in their own reveal trailer. It's kind of hard to make VR look social when someone's not in it with you, right? And that's always kind of like struck me as one of the strengths of VR, of course, is being able to talk to people remotely and hang out with people, and telepresence and all that is a huge use case. But the technology actually has the potential to bring us closer together in person through AR, right? So I've always been interested in that. I've done some stuff in the shared AR space, and this idea of like, like sports and VR immediately kind of struck me as really potentially compelling, because you could do something co-located, and by bringing people together, playing in the same space. That's ultimately what people want to do. People want to connect. They don't want to be in this dystopian world where we're wearing like face computers. So the kind of motivation for what we're calling Rec Sports 2.0 is, really at a center, like, like what sports do is they connect people and they let people have fun together and play together, and participate, together in something that's athletic, rewarding, competitive, but also fun. And so I think AR has, a really huge potential here if you do this in person. And it's a very different kind of approach from, I think, what the companies want to push right now, what they think is going to be the big thing. But, we feel very strongly that playing together in person is what people want to do. So my vision for this is really, connecting people, whether existing friends or making new friends, and eventually viewing these headsets as a piece of sporting equipment, the way you take a Frisbee or a basketball to the park or to the court and, play a pickup game or something. We're hoping that can be what these things are actually used for. And in some ways, it's kind of like the creation of a new genre, as a friend of mine pointed out, a new game genre, right? The new game genres come along fairly infrequently these days. Like the terrain's been fairly well explored, but oftentimes changes in technology make that possible. So for example, the first person shooter, right, became possible in the early 90s because of rendering advancements and processing power advancements. And then you had home internet arrive, and now you can have these like multiplayer, deathmatch kind of games. That was like that was a huge like kind of, turning point in PC gaming. And I think this might be the cusp of something as well, this idea of like co-located in person, still seeing each other, but having, stuff added that you can't do in real life. So here's some like gameplay. Hopefully this plays okay. I'll just kind of go through this. So I think I tried muting the audio, but something might be leaking through. This is the first person view. This is a test that we did at 2-Bit Circus in LA. And these are actually just people that were playing that wanted to shoutcast. They really got into it and wanted to shoutcast their friends playing the game. And you can see we have like a mixed reality live view of it. So you can actually see what people are doing in those headsets together. And of course, as you saw, they can see each other. We've done some tests outside, which we hope will be possible in the future. And I think that's probably the gamut of this footage right here. Yeah, this is at AR House LA, by the way. And there's also a corresponding event that we threw to kind of like debut this. And again, we have like the mixed reality capture running, so anybody, could see what was going on as people were playing. So let's see if I can get past this. Yeah, so again, I kind of already went through this, but kind of a counterintuitive thesis here. Headsets as sporting equipment, take it to the park and play a game in the real verse. Right now, you can't take it to the park unless it's like after 6 p.m. because the sensors on the devices, especially the tracking cameras, are not really designed for outdoor use. There's not really a huge technical reason, or like not a huge technical barrier, I should say, to making that possible. It's a matter of like, design choices that have been made. Obviously, when these things are on the drawing board, and I think even headsets now on the drawing board, they're going to be out in a year. They never really thought they'd be used outside. It just does. It's like one of those things that if you proposed at a meeting at one of these companies, you probably wouldn't be invited back to that meeting. It's just not. They have like a very, kind of myopic vision of what it's going to be for. But people tend to surprise the companies with kind of what they do, especially third-party application developers, right? Like when it gets into people's hands, sometimes the actual use cases can be very surprising, and that's what we think will be the case here. Yeah. So again, like it's opposite of what they, really think the headsets are going to be doing, because they kind of have to make a guess without very much, like a lot of this stuff is being built without any market validation whatsoever, which is kind of surprising, but it's actually true. Like I can guarantee it that like they, it's really, AR is kind of like being, and VR as well, are kind of being driven by like, well, this is really cool technology. It seems like it's finally possible to make it, affordable. Surely that we can, kind of muscle through and like figure out something to do with this tech. And we don't want to miss the boat, and be caught flat-footed if it does explode. But there's really not a huge amount of validation as to whether consumers are actually asking for it or not, which is a big problem in the industry in general, unfortunately. And we've seen this kind of over and over again, where like a lot of devices come out, they're really cool, we love to play with them, but it's like there's always some reason why they're not there yet, and there's always theories about what it is that's going to get it there. But it still remains to be seen. It's not going away, but will it explode? Who knows? And I think that we're trying to find something that's unique and different than what people are proposing. Yeah, so we're using a lot of computer vision, obviously, to make this happen. The main thing, right, is the spectator camera registration. So meaning we have a mix, like one of the key things here is spectating. It's like super important for it to look cool while you're spectating. It has to be real time, it has to be easy. Eventually I want to have it just on like an iPhone. In fact, I'm starting to work on that now, where you can just hold it up and immediately synchronize to the headsets. So when I say registration, I mean registering the camera coordinate system to the headset so that you can then render things relative to the video feed as they would be seen by the players in the headset. Human segmentation is something that we have to do as well, meaning like, right now in those videos that I showed you, those were kind of old videos, and you might have noticed that everything's kind of rendered on top and there's not really any depth with regards to real objects, like people in the real world, which is a problem. Body tracking is going to come into play for like augmenting the players and adding, customizations, cosmetics, body armor, just making it look cooler. And even environment mapping at some point we might, want to add and replace the physical environment while still focusing on the real people. We don't want to replace people with avatars, but there's some stuff we could do to make arenas look cooler for spectators. And I don't have footage. I have this footage, but we're not showing it, I should say. It works just fine, but we're kind of saving it for showing in a month or two. We're kind of going to be using this internally for some stuff. But we did a test where we kind of upgraded the particle effects, added post-processing, so things look a lot better now. And as well as added human segmentation. You can see it working here, where the explosions in front of him, he's being kind of cut out. Likewise here, right? The fireball is behind him relative to the camera, and I'm behind the fireball, right? And everything's kind of layered more or less correctly. So that's a great application of computer vision right there. So that's kind of where things are heading now. Our plans in the coming months, we're still really early. This was all the code that you saw, all the demos you saw, where it's about like 2-3 months of work on my part to get it to that point. We're really excited about what's coming next. We're actually raising money beginning probably sometime next week or so, going into October for like initial seed to figure out like where to go next. And we're super excited about where this might lead. And it's been a wild ride so far, and I'm curious to see where it goes. And I'm super excited for the arrival of several pass-through headsets in the coming months. And I think those of you that are doing AR should be excited as well, because this is going to be the main kind of path forward for several years, to actually do those head-mounted experiences that we know are going to be a lot better than the phone-based experiences. So that's all I want to talk about today. Thank you for your time. Please follow me on Twitter. Bartron Polygon is my handle. Also my co-founder 6live and our venture Recverse. But if you follow any of us, you'll obviously see updates as they come. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and take any questions you guys might have.
Thanks, Bart. Apologize again for the name misspelling. Nevertheless, amazing presentation. We have a few questions that rolled in. Would you like to read them, or should I read them out to you?
Hold on a second. I actually lost my mouse cursor, which is another fun thing. But can you kick off my screen, or kick out my screen?
Sure. Let me see.
There we go. I'm back. Stop share.
All right. Cool.
All right. Yeah, no, you want to go for it? I didn't see all the questions.
Yeah, I'll go for it.
Maybe you want to pick them.
All right. So one from. Actually, I'll start with my question, which shifted once I saw those new graphics. So are those real-time graphics, or is there a post processing in that?
Oh yeah, this is really important. Everything that we ever show is real-time. Wow. Like basically the way I do it is we run in real time. I just do like an OBS screen capture of it. We never ever touch it up in post, because we've seen a lot of that going on. There's a lot of other stuff in the space that, it's kind of done up in post and, might look cooler because it's done up in post, but we really want to show what's actually possible, even if it's just the kind of crappy Unity store asset stuff that I put together initially. So it's all absolutely real time.
Incredible. Yeah. Awesome. Question from Chris. Aren't most VR headsets too heavy for the physical activity you're suggesting? Have you seen complaints about the weight?
No, not a problem. The Quest right here is quite light already. It hasn't proven to be an obstacle. Our game right now is pretty short. This may be a valid concern if the game was much longer, and eventually they will be, but when it gets to that point, the headsets will be lighter too. So the game, by the way, is kind of like a duel. You're throwing fireballs at each other right now, and you have to run to charge. So it's very physically active and it's very intense. And you have like basically up to 3 1-minute rounds. People are essentially like wiped after that. But the headset weight has never really been a complaint. Neither has actually sweating, given the time constraint here, because your sweat reflex kind of takes a while to kick in. So usually you'll start sweating after the game is over, which is kind of nice. But yeah, surprisingly, no. I mean, the weight of the current headsets is quite low, and it's going to get lower still. Like I think ski goggles weigh around. I was actually kind of surprised. It seemed high to me, but I read on, if you Google it, it's like they say like anywhere from 100 to 250 to 300 grams, which is pretty heavy. And that's certainly that 100 to 300 gram range for sure is where the next generation of headsets can easily fit into. And I think that is absolutely acceptable for even a fairly extended amount of gameplay. And as you can see, people are doing fitness and so forth. So actually, yeah, I mean, the current standalone headsets are very, very light, but you would not want to do this in like a previous gen, obviously cabled, bulky headset for sure.
Awesome. It seems like a few more questions rolled in. I'll try to get to, well, maybe two or three more. We have a couple minutes. Question from Stephen Bruce. What kind of off-the-shelf AR experiences will these pass-through VR headsets have?
That I'm not sure. That's really up to the companies, and I think who knows what they're thinking of, right? I do think that they've demonstrated kind of like the infinite monitors concept, and like I think Horizon's workspaces probably will map to pass through really well. I can think of a number of applications that you could do in that. Imagine like educational applications and so forth, telepresence, fitness stuff, gaming, whatever. But it's a question, like it remains to be seen, and we'll see in October what Facebook is gonna, or Meta, I should say, is gonna present this as. But I do know that they are definitely looking for, they don't have it all figured out, and they are starting to look at like, funding people who have compelling applications to bring to the table. It's pretty difficult to get like Meta funding, but it's clearly the case that they're also kind of wondering what is going to be the big breakout use case right away. And is it the case the hardware is maybe kind of launched before any killer apps have actually been developed, which is kind of a recurring problem in the industry.
We'll ask one more question from John. How large could the shared group area be? Can it span through multiple rooms?
Depends on how you do it, right? Like, so with a current Quest, sort of, you wouldn't want to play this at home. Like for rec, you would not want to play it at home. We typically recommend at least a 15 by 15 space and ideally a 30 by 30 space. We actually disable the Guardian when we play the game altogether. And I'm sure the future headsets won't need a Guardian, because like, why would you need that in AR? It gets a little bit tricky with like rooms in a house, because at least in my house, the device can get pretty confused going from room to room. But you could obviously, if you're talking about something like my mixed reality laser tag setup, where you have like dedicated depth cameras or cameras providing an outside in sort of, tracking reference as well, you could obviously do that. The Void did that. And I suspect that very soon you will be able to do that pretty easily. I think they're technically, the Quest is technically spec'd for it right now. It's just that I find it to be a little bit finicky. But I remember the HoloLens used to work through multiple rooms in the house, and I'm pretty sure the devices on the drawing board that are coming out in the next couple of years are going to be, especially for pass-through, are going to be spec'd for being able to move around the house, an entire house probably. So yeah, absolutely, these experiences will, because otherwise it's pretty useless. Like if you have a device that you can like see through and continue your daily activities at home, and you can't like walk around in it throughout the house, it's a pretty dead on arrival idea as far as I'm concerned. Awesome. So I expect it to be possible soon.
Thank you, Bart. We have to move on, but there's one more question on the chat. If you can get back to Karthik about the raw camera access. And if you have any more questions, or do you want to
no
just
raw
answer
camera
that?
access allowed.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Bart, for joining.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Cool. Next up, we have Reza Chaji, the CEO and founder of VueReal, with us tonight. They're a Waterloo-based company focused on revolutionary technologies for enhancing electronic subsystems, displays, sensors, imagers, by integrating millions of high-efficient micro nano devices into system substrates. Reza has over 70 published papers and 1 book in the field of display and sensor, over 150 filed granted patent applications, and received several prestigious scholarships and awards, including Young Alumni Achievement Medal, Faculty of Engineering, University of Waterloo, and the CMS Douglas R. Colton Medal for Research Excellence in 2009. Thank you so much, Reza, for joining us tonight.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, and you see the screen?
Not yet.
Okay, let me.
I see your screen now.
Okay. So today I'm going to talk about one of our technologies. So at VueReal, our main process is how to print these devices on the surface and create different systems. Today I'm going to talk about our solution for augmented reality application. So if you look at, let's say, the best display that anybody is looking for augmented reality, after we did a survey of different companies, we find out that they want it to be as small as possible so that you can fit it in a glass. Definitely they want full color, high brightness, hundreds of thousands to 1 million nits. They need to be high resolution, both number of pixels and also pixel pitch. They're looking at around 3 micron full color pixel pitch, and also low power because it's a portable device and you don't want to have a huge battery on somebody's neck. So those are the requirements. So if you look at existing technology, laser, OLED, and the typical micro LEDs, they're doing good at some stuff, but then they lack some major kind of points. So for example, laser, if you want to do high brightness, high resolution, that's not possible. There were a few companies that were going to do Fourier rendering so that they can do the resolution on only when you need it and increase the brightness where you need it, but it didn't work out well. The computation is very cumbersome. OLED, you can get RGB, but then you're going to have a hard time on the resolution and also brightness. Micro LED, despite all the promises, actually is not that good in terms of resolution and brightness, because it's very hard to do RGB side by side in such a high pixel density. And then if you make LED that small, the efficiency is going to be really bad. And so those are the big barrier for micro LED. So what they do right now, you do single color, you use cubic dicoloric pure cube, and then you prism, and then you mix them together, create RGB. So alignment accuracy, alignment at such a small thing is very hard. You need to have 3 display. Controlling 3 displays is challenging. And even making monochrome display at such high resolution is not that easy. So at VueReal, we developed a self-aligned process that can kind of solve most of these issues. So if you look at general approach for micro LED, one is flip chip bonding. You make the LED in one substrate. You have your backplane with pixel circuit. You bond it together. The material difference, the difference between the material set, it's going to cause thermal expansion difference, and therefore alignment is going to be a big issue, especially if you go to such small devices. And the other one, as you make the devices very small, you're going to lose efficiency. There is another approach that some company, I think Pelesi is using this, is you bond it to the epi first to the backplane, you remove the substrate, then you make the LED. It eliminates the issue of the alignment, but still the small LED challenge is going to be there and it's going to cause some issues. So what we did at VueReal, we didn't make LED. So we find a way to confine the current into the epi structure. So epi is where you form all these layers that create kind of electron barrier at different charge barrier, and then you get the electron kind of transition from one energy to the other energy level and create light. So it's that's kind of the epi layer is a monolithic on a wafer level. if you want to make a small LED, you need to turn it to a small LED by etching. So we didn't do that. We create some current confinement structure that can confine the current into a small area in the epi and therefore form a pixel. By doing that, we managed to make very small LEDs. So because we are not etching it, we are not damaging the device, we are not creating any defects. So we can make very small devices. We've shown actually 0.5 micron LED in one of the SIDs. And the other benefit of that, because we can do very small LED, we don't need to really do a proper alignment. So we make a surface full of this current confinement structure, and then we just put it on the backplane substrate and bond it. Wherever it touched the pixels area, it creates the pixel. So it's a very self-aligned process. It's a high yield and high throughput. So these are actually, you see some of those current confinement when it touched the pad, it actually creates very nice pattern here. And you can see different pixels, very separated pixels, both for our 3 color, red, green, blue. These are some of the demo that we made with this self-aligned process. And then we shown that it's doable to achieve very high resolution displays. Now the challenge is color. Okay, we have monochrome. If we go the same path as everybody else, still we need 3 devices, and then we need to use the prism to merge the color and create full color displays. And we know that's not a good approach. So what we did, I kind of eliminated some of the details, but because of the IP, still a lot of IP on the development, but the high level is a single display that we made. And instead of doing RGB subpixels, we did RGB array. So we have one array in the same backplane that is green and then blue and then red. So the single display, we just rearranged the pixels. So instead of doing RGB subpixels, we just created a red array in the display, a green array in the same display, and blue. And then we came up with an optics, linear optics that can merge all these 3 and create a full color. So actually, we demoed this proof of concept of this at SID this year. We showed a 2 micron RGB pixels, which I think is the highest resolution pixel RGB right now in the anybody shown. So the beauty of this is that we can use our self-aligned process for each of the arrays. And because we are using CMOS backplane, we get our alignment between the 3 displays from the CMOS backplane, not from the mechanical alignment. It's a single display that we need to interface with it. And so it makes it much easier to work. So that's kind of what we've been doing. High level, as I mentioned, we can do very small. This was one of our earlier demonstrations that we showed at SID. We showed a higher resolution than this one. And so kind of, as I mentioned, these are some of the stuff that we have been doing. And we are now working on full display samples that we can offer to our partners by second half of next year. That's kind of my high level topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Reza. And now I'll pass it off to Barry Seff for any questions.
Sorry, thank you, Reza, for the presentation. I had some questions for you. Give me 1 second. Okay. Do you think that there will be production of your technology in the US? Or is it gonna be
actually, we even for right now, we are making large display in Canada. So I think I have a little bit of time I can explain. So we with this printing process that we developed, we can actually scale production in North America. Traditional way of making displays with all those fab. My background is in OLED, so if you use any OLED TV, it's using the technology that we developed and we licensed to LG. So it takes a long time, a lot of capital to make a fab for large displays. But with our printing process, you can do displays in North America. It's easy to do it. And we have a printer that we developed in collaboration with ASM that now we are making displays. Internally right now, we are targeting a strategic market like aerospace, some automotive application, medical, industrial. So we actually right now making display in Canada and selling it in Canada. So I think we are the only display company right now that makes large display. Micro display, there are few, but large display. So we're going to do similar things also for our micro display. So we're going to start produce them in Canada.
Wow, you said your partner is ASML or ASM?
ASM.
Oh, is that a based in the US company or Canadian company as well?
No, ASM, the main company is actually in the US, but they bought I think a German-based company and another one. And this branch that we work with them on this tool is based in Hong Kong.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Okay, and so you talk about your printing technology. Are you making the equipment, or will you make it with your partner? Like, is your business model to license this technology to other companies, or are you going to sell the ink and the equipment?
Yeah, so
I mean, not literal ink. I understand it. It's not ink,
yeah,
but you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, it's a multifaceted business model. So right now we are on the custom displays. We're actually doing it ourselves. So we do the design. It's a low volume, high margin market. We do it ourselves. So we do the backplane, we do the cartridge and the printing, everything ourselves. We are also collaborating with some large company for consumer market. So two of our investors, actually LG and Samsung. So we are collaborating with some of the large companies for consumer market. So over there, it would be more of a license and technology transfer. But at the same time, also we think a printing process similar to what happened at the printer for your home would create other opportunities as well. Big companies or small company, they would buy this printer and different inks, if you call them, and they create different applications. We are working on sensors, different sensors, different devices, so you can mix and match and create different applications. Wow. So I think it's going to create another business opportunity for VueReal as well. So in addition to traditional licensing and a custom display, we think they're going to be interesting, right? Yeah.
Interesting. We need to talk. I work for a company. We sell electronic inks, but also solder paste. So yeah, we should talk. It might be interesting for us. So there's another question. I think that maybe this is someone else, but maybe they weren't clear. Obviously, micro LEDs are passed through AR, right? So your micro LEDs would be for pass. Your technology would be for pass through AR, correct?
You can use them for waveguide, or you can use them for reflective, traditional kind of thing. So it depends on how you use it. We don't work on the optic side, so we just make the light engine.
Okay, cool. So to further on that, the final question is: how long do you think it would be to have your type of technology in AR headsets? Like, I'm not sure if you're already working with other companies, but you know, you see it out in 2 years, 5 years, or more. Or what are your projections?
Yeah, AR is always 1 year away, so it's hard to say. Yeah, so we'll see.
All right, very nice. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that, and so happy that Ron put us in touch with you. And
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, all the best for you and your company.
Yeah,
thanks.
Mark, Reza, thank you for joining.
Thank you. Let me stop.
Thank you, Reza. Moving forward, next up, I'm excited to have Shuli Sade with us tonight. Shuli is a multidisciplinary artist who's working with mixed mediums, including photography, videography, augmented reality, site-specific installations, sculpture, and drawing. She created 9 public art augmented reality installations within the past 8 years, which is incredible. Sade received the Pollock-Krasner Foundation Grant in 2014 and the National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship in 1991, among other grants. She taught and lectured at the University of Pennsylvania School of Architecture, Parsons School of Design, Columbia University, Barnard College, and Bezalel Academy of Art and Design. Currently, she is creating a large-scale mural for the new City Hall in Huntsville, Alabama. Her work is represented by Galleria Ethra, Mexico City. She lives in New York City and works at her studio at Mana Contemporary, New Jersey. Thank you so much, Shuli, for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. All right, I'll just try to share my screen.
Awesome.
All right. So here we go. It's a kind of a clash between the technology, very, very heavy technology, and the artist's perception. But without technology, I wouldn't be able to do all what I'm doing. So thank you for the two other presenters. These are all the shows that that Andy was just mentioning, where I did public art installations with different kinds of augmented reality. Which is, of course, a merger of art and technology. Augmented reality creates digital spaces, blurring the lines between the physical and digital worlds. Mixed media environments create an illusion of real life, a fusion between reality and illusion. And my first augmented reality was 8 years ago. And as a multidisciplinary artist, just let the birds say their words. As a multidisciplinary artist working with a variety of mediums, I was curious to apply this new medium to my artwork as it projected a potential symbiosis between 2- and 3-dimensional art, adding movement, scale, and time to flat art. The first project that I would like to talk to you about is still up and live, and I would love everybody who is in New York to go and check it for yourself. It is bird's eye view, and it's a Battery Park City, it's all along the Esplanade, so you can just walk from the North Cove to the South Cove and see 14 signages. Bird's eye view is a mixed media environment of painted birds, sound, and aerial view of Battery Park City as seen from above by the birds. 70 QR codes printed on 14 signages installed between South and North Cove, reflecting the AR installation. The birds represent a variety of species migrating to this park. Inspired by migration and immigration, one can see the birds juxtaposed to the Statue of Liberty and Alice Island. Unimposing on the landscape, the installation can be seen only if the viewer chooses to activate it by using a personal device. And this is just a little bit of a glimpse of what it took for me to render the birds and to make them fly, which was probably the majority of the work preparing for the birds. I received 30 still images from Cornell Lab of Ornithology of birds which are actually in the middle of flying, but they weren't really flying, so I had to turn it with animation and a lot of hard work. But finally, the result was I usually like to view the viewers from a corner of the Esplanade to see how they activate and work with the signage and with the QR codes. The duration of the experiment is controlled by the viewer. Should the viewer wish to share the experiment with others who are not attending, one can share videos and photos taken while the experiment is still alive. So the birds that I received as imagery, and I turned all the birds, first of all, to kind of painted birds, and they are like watercolor birds. And then I turned on the animation, and then I got into the AR. And people are engaged with it in different ways, and some of them are more patient than others. And then the change of seasons helped just having different backgrounds. This is where Battery Park City Authority just have these amazing tulips at the beginning of the springtime. And it was just, I just had to do this, just look at it and and take different experiments in different places. And the last of this particular project is a group of AR students from Marymount Manhattan College came by. And these are our future AR people, obviously. So it's such a joy to share this with people when I happen to be on site, which is not all the time. By the way, this is South Co, and it's Mary and Mrs. Wonderful project, which is more than 30 years that is there, and it's just such a beautiful spot at Battery Park. And then a little bit of exposure here.
To Manhattan now, where a new augmented reality display is giving participants a chance to learn about the birds who fly through our city each year. This is what it looks like when you scan the new exhibit called Bird's Eye View along the Battery Park City waterfront. It features images of 30 types of birds who can visit the city each year from their perspective flying overhead. There are 14 panels throughout Rockefeller Park and South Cove.
So we are moving to the next project, which is Evolving Formations. It's a data-driven matrix fusing site-specific zoning arrangements with existing historic architecture at MIT. This project is commissioned by MIT. It is a pioneer collaboration of two-dimensional art with an augmented reality presentation. Installed at a newly constructed building hosting MIT Museum and MIT Press, the work installed at the lobby can be seen with or without activating the AR installations. And here you can see both phases, with and without. We installed during COVID, and so finally we got to celebrate the piece 3 months ago in Boston and Cambridge, and you could see how people are engaging with the augmented, standing next to the art piece and then just like playing with the augmented reality. Another very important point about why these cubes and why the shapes, they're all coming out from the art itself, and the artwork relates to particles and the research, the ongoing research at MIT. So I just took out, after designing the art piece, I removed all these particles and then created 3D objects and then turned it into AR. And here you can see that it's all taking the same color. I'm working with dimension I mean, there are phases that I'm creating those objects, and I'm using a few different softwares. And there is the wall next to the artwork is really beautiful. It's concrete, raw concrete, and terrazzo floor. The building is designed by Weissman Manfredi Architects, and I totally love the juxtaposition of the concrete with the colorful art piece. So moving backwards, actually, I'm moving back to 2017. This project was the first project that was actually bought by my clients. The clients were Montefiore Medical Center, and it's titled Daydreams. And it was really such an honor to work for a wonderful medical center and to be appreciated for it and compensated. So Daydreams is made of photographs mixed with poetry. The images are formed into sphere shapes, a mix of manipulated and layered nature photographs of the Hudson Valley. Daydreams is 100 augmented reality orbs are overwritten with Edgar Allan Poe poetry. Edgar Allan Poe spent the last years of his life at Poe Cottage at the Bronx. I choose to use poems written and inspired by a Bronx writer to reference local culture, history. All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream, a poetic, visionary, augmented reality statement in Poe's own words. And in fact, there are two parts of the garden. And so one side of the garden was daydreams, and the other side of the garden was night visions, and it was all the negatives of the daydreams. So people could walk through the lobby to connecting both courtyards. And back in time, we're back to COVID days, because this was when I was invited to take part in a larger exhibition called Regrowth. It was along Riverside Park. And I was the only artist doing AR. The rest were definitely like more conventional, like painters, photographers, and sculptors. And this project was installed in four sites: 64th Street, 79th Street, 125th Street, and 149th Street. It's intended to highlight the temporariness of time and of the ever-flowing water by making virtual ethereal objects which are simultaneously visible and invisible. These oblate shapes, augmented logograms, which are symbols used to represent language, reflecting ecological, topographic, and technological wisdom, metaphorically carried by the river. You could see on the left, on the upper left, it's the topographic. The upper right, it's the algae, which I used the algae from the river. Did a huge research about what the river has and what kind of algae, and in the urban, the frontal image is really based on urban wisdom, which most of my work has a lot to do with the DNA of the city. Just the signage itself. So I choose to have like about 24 QR codes on each sign. And as you see, there was a dictionary on the top of the QR code, so people could choose what they would like to see. And this, the signage was holding for 4 or 5 months, and it was really beautifully protected, no vandalism or anything like that. And this is just a reminiscence of COVID and the masks. Hopefully we're out of it. That's basically it.
That was so cool. I love all your work. Thank you, Shuli, so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Very different from the first 2 presentations.
It was fascinating and really great learning about all your projects. I'm going to pass it to Barry if we have any questions from the audience.
Yeah, some really great questions. I'll throw out a couple because I don't know how much time you have, but I know that everyone was interested in what platform you're using for these amazing installations, particularly in the city and around, and also, you know, you have a real like illustrious career. You've been around for doing all types of art, and how did you get into like interactive and AR type of art?
Right. So I don't have technological background at all. I mean, my background is art, but I've been a photographer and videographer, so in editing and all of that. So I'm always curious. So when augmented reality just came out, I thought this is just a perfect combination between the 2 and the 3-dimensional. So, you know, my curiosity led me to start working with it. And I used so many different platforms, including at the very early phase, it was Layar, and then I went to Artivive, and then I used Membit and Airy, and right now I'm using Adobe Aero. And the reason why Adobe Aero works for me so well is because finally I can control it by myself. That, I mean, I love collaborations, but this is easier for me. The thought process when I create an art piece and I actually work by myself with the elements is very helpful to develop an artwork. So Adobe Aero is, when I started with the MIT project, they didn't have sound yet, but luckily they added the sound option. And so my birds project is already with sound. So that was very helpful.
Amazing. It's really awesome to hear your thought process. And I guess we're a little proud to hear you work with Artivive. We had them in the summer. So yeah, so we had, I don't remember names, so bad with names, but it was a really nice presentation. Happy to see that you're using that. Okay, so another one for you. When compared to conventional art, which is always like right in front of you, as like you're here and the art's there, but is there a challenge to get someone to interact with an app to experience artwork that's otherwise like invisible? You can't touch or feel it, and it's multi-spatial, or shall we say, or spatial art.
Right. Well, it definitely helps when I'm around and giving tours, for example, to kind of lead the public into how to use the augmented, even though for most of you people who are very tech savvy, I'm sure it's just an easy click on the phone, but I do a lot of tours with the artwork when it's public art. Again, and then when I'm not there, there is just a signage explaining very easily what app I'm using, which one to download, and then it's just like self-explanatory. Once people get to the groove of the first image, the first experience, they get into the playing with it, and so that's very helpful. Again, the idea of combining the flat into a time-based art is just so revolutionary from the standpoint of like flat art. I think it's really the next phase of the combination. I really like the combination. I mean, on one hand, the public art with the river projects is really very, very exciting. But to me, the combination between the flat and the AR is really powerful, because it just like add another layer or many more layers to the artwork.
Wow, it's fascinating. Into the mind of into your mind, it's really amazing. You really are able to clarify it very well. Also, thank you. Okay, got one more for you. Let's see. For the MIT project, which was a commission work, we assume, was it intimidating to use a new type of medium, and what was that process from conception and developing it?
Okay, actually with the MIT, I took a risk because I knew that MIT, they would be happy to have something very contemporary and very technology savvy. And so it was quite a clear step that I took from once I I developed the whole art piece by itself. I just proposed that I will add an augmented reality component, and the clients were like totally cool with it and happy. In fact, one of the images is now used on a new book that is published by MIT Press, and the name of the book is Where Future Converges. Where Future Converge. Yes.
Wow. Well, you put a plug in for that. So we hope they gave you a nice royalty.
Yes.
Put the link out there for us to, we'd love to see it. It sounds like a really interesting book, and we'd love to hear from you again. And definitely any of your new installations. I mean, a lot of them seem to be local to us, but I'm sure we have people all over the States, Boston, all over. So feel free to keep telling us what you're working on. It's amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Could I ask one more question, Shuli?
Yeah.
How do you go about choosing the various locations for the experiences?
Well, sometimes it's by invitation, so the Hudson River was really an inspiration and is an inspiration to a lot of my work for many years. So when that project Regrows just happened, and the curator, who did not know me, just knew that I'm doing AR, invited me to create a project. I choose the locations by, of course, if the Wi-Fi works in that area, if everything works, that I can, have people go with their iPhones, because Android didn't work, so iPhone. So it's about that. As for Battery Park City Authority, after they were exposed to my other river project, they invited me to do this installation, which was awesome. And again, we carefully selected, together with Battery Park City Authority people, selected the areas where the Wi-Fi is better, where you could really have a better reception for the project. But yeah.
Thank you so much. It was really great having you on and learning more about your process and your work.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, awesome. Now, moving on to our final presentation, which I am looking forward to. We have Rony Abovitz here with us tonight. Rony's a a technology founder, pioneer, inventor, and visionary leader in the augmented reality space, who most of you probably know. He has a strong intellectual property background, and he built multi-thousand patent portfolios in his startups. Rony has a strong history of creating new technologies and businesses, from Magic Leap, the world's leading spatial computing company that he founded in 2011. Magic Leap invented and developed core technologies of spatial computing that helped define the entire field of augmented reality that we are discussing, that we discuss at this meetup. Under Rony's leadership, the company launched the Magic Leap 1 spatial computing system, the Creator Edition, and Magic Leap 1 Enterprise, both of which are currently in use at Fortune 500 companies, major universities, hospitals, developers, defense, and government around the world. At Magic Leap, a number of world's firsts were also achieved, including the world's first spatial computing web browser, Mako. Magic Leap, Magicverse software and tools, and hundreds of really awesome early applications and proof of concepts of the possibility of spatial computing. Rony sits on the board, who still sits on the board, was the founding CEO of Magic Leap until August 2020. Prior to Magic Leap, Rony also founded Mako Surgical in 2004, a medical software and robotics company specializing in manufacturing surgical robotic arm assistance technology used by hospitals worldwide. Rony served as the CTO and SVP of R&D, Chief Visionary Officer, before the company was acquired by Stryker Corporation in 2013 for $1.65 billion. Rony is currently working on his new venture, which he plans to launch, and was recently selected to join the Boston Consulting Group as a senior advisor to leaders from around the world. He is a member of the Tau Beta Pi Engineering Honor Society, a two-time World Economic Forum technology pioneer, and has spoken and lectured at universities and technology conferences around the world, including New York Augmented Reality. So thank you so much, Rony, for joining us tonight. It's really great to have you here.
Hey, Andy. Thanks, everyone. I'm hugely embarrassed that you've decided to read all that, but it's cool. Great to be back. Thank you for having me back again.
Thanks for being here. Would you be interested in sharing your perspective, or would you like to hear some questions come in from the audience?
I think questions will be great, because I think there's a lot of interesting, well, if there are no questions, then we can share a perspective, but I'd be really fun to dive in.
All right, awesome. Yeah, we can definitely do that. So I would love to just touch on spatial audio, since I know you have a background in as a musician, as well as a vast background in augmented reality. So just to get the ball rolling, I wanted to hear your perspective on the importance of audio, and maybe more specifically audio that is able to be placed within 3D environments, and how you feel that could affect augmented reality experiences now and in the future.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I was really blessed to be able to have an excellent spatial audio team and partnerships. We worked with Sennheiser Audio as well. The CEO became a good friend, a guy named Andres Sennheiser. And we were able to explore like a lot of amazing things in, sort of like one of the most important senses, right? So if you think about like where XR goes, I think it becomes what I think of as sensory field computing. So you got like the visual field, the sound field, haptics, which is the touch field, and then you could have taste and smell, but let's leave taste and smell out. What's really interesting is how we evolved with sound and vision in order to like survive. So if you remove the sound, or you have like stereo and not like truly accurate spatial sound, it's sort of disconcerting and you really hurt the experience a bit. And there's a difference between like being in a VR headset and having kind of like Dolby 5.1 and then being in like an augmented reality world, like in a large space. Think about like a building of a couple 100,000 square feet, and you can actually leave sounds in space. That's where it got really nuts for me. The first time I experienced like walking down the stairwell of our building and we had put sound in space and you could see the sound walking around like a disembodied ghost. It was just like the hair would go up on your neck. It was really intense. And as you walked to it, you felt the sound going in you and then leaving you, and it was behind you again, then you go up to it again. So it was incredible to go like what real physics true, like what real life spatial audio is. Like if you're outside, like Shuli talked about the birds, you know, birds fly around randomly in space and like you can locate them. You can locate sound, like if you're good, probably within 3-4 degrees, like in the sphere around your head. It helps us like understand if there's like a threat or predator coming. But when you have incredibly good spatial audio and you have large spaces, like imagine one day New York is entirely digital twin and you could just leave spatial audio things in places. Like a band could perform and where everyone was, like the drummer, the bass player, the guitar player, like they played at this place in Central Park and leave that there. And then you can go back and sit where you were in the audience and have that perfectly reproduced. Like here you are in Central Park and there's like Simon and Garfunkel, 1968, not a stereo mix, but like, oh my God, it is the exact reproduction. We did things like that. And I think it just presents like this amazing set of opportunities that's, I can't say it's unexplored because I think there's a lot of people really excited about it, but they're kind of exploring it, I would say more in like static VR. The part that I found most mind-blowing is when you start to like digitally twin large spaces, like whole campuses, like universities, imagine all of NYU and then all of Manhattan and all of New York. That's where it gets really, really incredible. And we absolutely did stuff like that.
That's really
I don't know
cool.
if that makes sense, but I was like so excited about it. I'll tell you guys one crazy thing we did. We basically peeled Beatles tracks apart. So we had like Ringo, John, Paul, George, and we set them up. So like Paul was playing bass, you know, and then there's like Ringo on the drums. And it was just incredible because like you walk into the room and like you felt the presence of the band in a room. And it was very different from like listening to something on headphones. It just had a different feel. And we were being now this idea of like where you can like figure out the physics of like your head transform, like where are you in space against the actual acoustics of that room, moving through multiple rooms, what that's really like. We even built this like test with like a cluster of, I think it was like 80 or 100 speakers to create like a true sound field and then to like go, okay, like how could you do that as you're moving around? Like what would that feel like? So it is a kind of an awesome thing. And I think at some point it will all come together, right? You gotta think that like the company spending billions of dollars per year or billions of dollars per quarter, some are probably spending billions of dollars per month, are going to put it all together in some mind-blowing ways. And we're just at the very beginning taste of it. But I think it's so important. Even if you're not a sound person, it will make the hair stand up on your neck when you experience the right version of it.
Does content need to be tailored specifically for this type of audio, or can you use an existing Beatles track and repurpose it?
Well, there's a purist point of view, and I have a lot of friends who are high-end producers and sound engineers, and then there's the like in-between point of view. So I think from the purist point of view, they would want to treat it like sound objects, like an object moving in space, like a real vector, like just like a true physics object moving in space. And when I've experienced that, it is extraordinary. And I don't know if most people have. Most people are thinking like it's a 5.1 or 7.1 mix, which is like, okay, there's like speakers here, behind you, above. And a lot of engineers are used to like mixing that way, right? But there's something else about, wait, that thing just went down the stairwell in a gigantic multi-story building, and you can't mix like that in a normal like board with a 5.1. You have to use like game engine object physics, and then it's extraordinarily interesting and different from what people are used to. So I think what most people pass off as sound field right now is like a 5171 mix, which is great if you're sitting in a room and you're not moving your head. But it's totally different if you're going to wear some like next generation system, running outdoors, going in and out of rooms. Then you're actually mixing for like multiple dynamic spaces, which is like an entirely new field of audio engineering, right? So if you're a freshman at Columbia Music right now, Columbia University School of Music, you might start to think about this because by the time you're in grad school, maybe there's a job that does that, 4 to 6 years from now. Like maybe that's some kind of mainstream job, but right now it's like weird experimental music stuff.
Is there specific hardware that needs to be used in order to experience the audio?
Absolutely. I think most systems don't really do this. I think a few things. One, if you want to experience what I'm talking about, you kind of need to be in a space that's been digitally mapped, that's large and ideally has multiple rooms. So think about like an apartment building with multiple floors and multiple rooms, and you've scanned the whole thing and you have a digital twin of that, and it's stored on a drive. It's stored like in a computer in your pocket, or it's streaming from some edge computing. And then you need a device that can localize you quite accurately as you're moving through space in real time. And then it needs to like render the sound field physics equations in also near real time, like, probably in the couple millisecond range. If you pull all that together, now that's not like the $200 VR thing you just buy off Amazon, but like you can get into that kind of experimentation for probably the devices that are higher end. Like if you're spending $2,000 to $4,000 or $5,000 on systems, you could start to play with that. Unfortunately, it's not in the multi-$100 systems unless you're like a hacker and you can like wire things up and like build your own like weird LiDAR scanner kind of stuff. But you can get pretty close if you're a good hacker.
So to me, hey Rony, thanks again.
Hey.
This is Barry here. So this seems to me like something maybe like an escape room or like a 90s club, like Limelight or something. You'd go into different rooms and there'd be different effects that you could curate somehow indoors. Is that something? I mean, or you're saying like there's nothing available yet, but I'd say maybe the first instance could be a purely controlled room that you can really do it and people can experience it. Right now, you have to have thousands of dollars of equipment, right, for it to work. It's not like a normal. I thought you said something about Sennheiser, or someone said Sennheiser. I know that's
Sennheiser does make spatial audio microphones, and they are definitely building different spatial audio toolkits. So you can like play with them. Like if you're in like the higher end, you could like hook up with some Sennheiser gear. You can get yourself like a Magic Leap 2 or a HoloLens X or the Meta Cambria. And if you're a good coder and have a good team, you can experience what I've been describing like this year. There's no reason that's not possible. But what's interesting is then you begin to think of sound as not this thing trapped in a stereo, but it's sound with a naturalistic depiction of the world. Like if you're in New York, there's a guy down the street yelling, and then he's going down the hallway, and then you go into this restaurant and it's got wood floors, and like all the materials and all the environments, you can also know what they are and understand their reflections, because you could be doing room modeling either through like a pre-scan, or as you're just walking into the world, scanning it into existence. They could also understand the shape and materials and what the audio would be like, which is really extraordinary. So things could adapt like the real world do, like sound bounces off the materials like it's supposed to. You can have that, and then things will feel more and more perfect as you experience these like digital realities.
Wow.
Question came in from, sorry, Barry.
No, I mean, I have like dystopian stuff. I hear like people like in China in their like apartments and like going crazy. They're locked up on COVID lockdowns. Or I hear like people in New York City banging their pots or something like outside, and then you can hear how it was, in these days of unity or whatnot. But yeah, there's some good questions over here. Not necessarily about audio, but we might as well ask them because we have you here. She was asking about thoughts on progress in machine learning with models like CLIP. I don't know that acronym, CLIP, that leverage natural language such as stable diffusion. Do you have any thoughts on that? That's from Bart.
I do, and I'll be careful because my new startup is like pretty deep in AI. I think it's extraordinarily powerful. One of my friends is the founder of Midjourney. I don't know if you guys are playing with that at all, but it's extraordinary, and we're at the very beginning of, I think, like a decade to 2 decade just extreme set of changes about what computing and software are. And it's going to rip through everything. And like the speed of its change is so extraordinary, I think people are far from being prepared for it. And if you start to combine that with this form of computing and these like, massively multi-person environments, there's like things we can't quite contemplate. And even like in Snow Crash, like which, Neil, who worked with us at Magic Leap, and if you guys read Ready Player One, like we might be coming into these like extraordinarily different understandings of reality in this weird pace. Like it could be incredibly fast in some, and in some weirdly distributed parts of the world, you're going to have this like very interesting like AI taking over everything. But then you have other parts of the world where we're still not even on like a computer, or you're still trying to like get your 4G to work with your iPhone, so it's this like uneven distribution. I think is actually going to be weird because like this question on like, stable diffusion and what's happening with AI, it's spiking in some extraordinary way, but like whole industries will have nothing to do with it.
Unknown caller.
And it's gonna be interesting to see how quickly it seeps into what, like architecture or design or art, and it's already having like all kinds of upheaval and arguments with people because it's like rippled so quickly. Like the Copyright Office in the US government's fighting back against this already, refusing copyrights from an AI. So I mean, and this is like all happening like at like weird lightning speeds. So I think the progress is going to be breathtaking. I think we're on some exponential curve, and like it's just if you're really in it, the change month by month, quarter by quarter, if you're really feeling what's going on, it is unbelievable right now.
What are some of the ways you're seeing haptic technology being utilized in augmented reality?
Oh, in augmented reality. It is a lot less than I thought. I think there's like some kooky looking systems that are pretty large and they sort of approximate like what it'll be there one day, but it seems to be a severely underfunded space. Like my first company was a haptic robot. And it was something we partnered with MIT's Artificial Intelligence Lab, and there was some extraordinarily robust haptics that were coming out. There was a company called Sensible that was doing this thing called the Phantom, which was 6 degree of freedom haptics. There was I think a company called Immersion, which licensed its stuff into like Logitech products, and it seemed to have this push, and then it's kind of faded away because in some sense like haptics was ahead of the curve. Like you almost need like AR and VR in order to have haptics come in. But it looks like if you look at the funding levels of like the sound and compute, it's like the first two senses, right? The visual thing and then the sound thing. Mm-hmm. They're orders of magnitude more than what I'm seeing in haptics. Like haptics is kind of like the third kid who's not getting food from mom and dad right now. I'm actually an advisor to a haptics company in Boston that's using it like this haptic gel called Gel Sight that has extraordinarily sensing. It's like human skin level sensing. There's actually a launch coming out this week, so you guys should focus on it for hackers. It'll be fun. And it's an indicator of what could be going on. I know Meta was talking about it. They're Meta's like their research labs, but I think in proportional, I think it's getting like 1,000th less funding, not like 10 times less, or I think it's getting like 1,000 times less funding than sort of the other pieces. So, but I think when you get it right, it could be amazingly interesting from a UI perspective to go out and grab something and it is exactly where you put your fingers and you feel the texture. There's something magic there, and I think at some point people are going to scream for it. They don't want controllers. Just kind of grabbing in air seems kind of weird where things are weightless. And if you've ever have felt real haptics in some kind of system, it is really neat. But it seems to be like the complexity of all of that right now, like getting sound right, getting the visuals right, getting these devices down to where they're incredibly good and low cost and billions of people can have them. All that's like very, very expensive. So I think people are kicking haptics off. And my guess is you'll see a lot of research and commercial use, like industrial commercial use for most of this decade, hacker use, maybe as early as next week, but maybe widespread consumer use, maybe at the end of the decade. I don't know. It'd be great to hear what you guys think.
Ted Brown wrote, in terms of haptics, there's a lot of exploration around using real surfaces and objects as interfaces, getting the haptics feel for free. Could you speak to that?
Do you want Ted to speak to that? You want me to speak to that?
Rony, if you have any thoughts on that, or yeah.
Yeah, I agree with him. I think there's an amazing amount of research, like MIT and Stanford, Northwestern University, all have like labs that have been exploring this for decades. Those are the ones that like pop into my mind right now. If I forgot somebody like NYU, sorry. And there really is like incredibly capable stuff using like all kinds of piezo resistors to like model a surface and then play that back on your skin so you could feel like fur and leather and wood. And so I feel like the building blocks are there, but what's missing is the scale of investment. You know, like maybe it's going to cost 10 billion a year to miniaturize haptics into some kind of like super lightweight glove that runs for 8 hours, that doesn't get dirty, that doesn't rip. You know, if you think about all this stuff, it's really difficult to get haptics to the point where you can imagine it as an everyday use. Like you got your iPhone, you stick in your pocket, but is haptics a glove? Is it some weird gripping thing that you have to carry? People have played with haptic mice and joysticks, and those are in like limited use. They didn't catch on as big as they should. And, you know, like professionally used to have these like haptic styluses, you can feel things. Probably the best use I could think of that scale is what we did at Mako is actually a haptic robot. It's used every day around the world. It's like haptics is the cornerstone how that works, but it's like $1 million robot. So if you want that level of fidelity that's super accurate in everyday life, like if you could feel that, you're like, oh, I want that with all my fingers all the time, everywhere. So I think there's a lot of work to get the speed and stiffness right, so you can actually really feel force. But I think feeling texture, so you go shopping online, there's already a lot of work there. I mean, you could put it into a product. The question is not putting into a research product or prototype. It's like, who's going to scale it? Like, are you going to get an Apple or a Microsoft or somebody who's really going to invest ultimately it was probably billions of dollars of like machine tooling and commercial marketing to like get it there. So I feel like they're all staging this as like after XR is really mainstream. That's how I see it.
Going back to the audio, I was wondering if you noticed any shift in actual like playing the instrument. Is there any effect that spatial audio can perhaps enhance, or is an instrument pretty pure of itself and there's no reason to alter that experience?
What I did see from some really interesting developers outside and inside the company, but again, early, was the idea of someone trying to create spatial audio instruments using spatial visualization as well, like turning any surface, parts of a room, and assigning like sounds and different triggers to that. You know, early examples of like the theremin. If you've ever seen a theremin, it's like you wave your hands around and it's like fixed area. Well, in theory, with spatial audio, you can have like people walking down the street triggering chords and sounds and notes. Probably the closest we got to that kind of really interesting exploration was with this Icelandic band called Sigur Rós, where if you really think about what this Tonandi app is, means sound spirits, the band like created disembodied sounds of themselves and released them to fly around rooms. And the idea was that they would fly around not just one room, they eventually would escape and inhabit Iceland and breed and form all kinds of like sonic instruments. And that you would have these like kind of mixing artificial life and generative AI with sound fields and AR. And at the very beginning of it, it is actually really cool. Like it's just kind of an early experiment, but I'm imagining, you know, get into the 2030s, are there whole new instruments that don't look like MIDI keyboards? They don't look like guitars, or maybe they have a guitar plus another musician who is the XR audio, spatial audio person. They're just waving their arms around or doing acrobatics, and that triggers like all kinds of sounds. I mean, in theory, you can be doing a lot of that today, but it's not as practical, but it feels like maybe it will be fairly soon.
Awesome. TK wants to know what is Sun and Thunder up to like at the latest?
Two things I could say, two or three things to say publicly. One, we're going to be releasing a second short film to a bunch of festivals, which is kind of hinting at our Story World project, which we're working on with this group called Weta in New Zealand. You guys may remember them from like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Avatar. So I've been working with them for a while, and we have this like cool animated short film, which is representative of this like story world we're building, and that's going to be in hopefully at the end of the year and throughout next year at different film festivals. That company is also incubating a bunch of interesting tech. We have spun out a deep tech company working on like, I'll just say very futuristic AI and how it collides with all these things. That company is called SynthBee. If you go to the webpage, it doesn't tell you anything. So that's the extent of what I could tell you right now.
Cool. Bart said he tried the Tonandi experience on the Magic Leap and really enjoyed it. So yeah, I second that. Great experience.
So Andy, with sound fields, what's been the group's experience? Because I think like with phones and like AirPods, you get little bits and pieces of it, but I don't know if most people have experienced like just true rich sound field yet.
Yeah, I don't think we've been able to explore that necessarily as a group, but it definitely seems like something to do for sure. Yeah. Where would we start out to like experience sound fields?
Well, an interesting thing is to go to like an analog sound field, like go to a concert hall, like Carnegie Hall or something, to listen to a live orchestra and get close to it without any electronics. And then you have this visceral sense of the sound all around you, and your chest is vibrating and you can actually feel that. Go to like a weird punk club in the village or something. Sure. And then if you remember what that's like, and then think that thing in its entirety, we do understand the physics enough to reproduce probably like 99.9% of it. And then you put on your headphones and you get convinced, like my current headphones are sort of doing that, but they're not quite. And when you go A, B, and you go, oh my God, that was intense to be inside Carnegie Hall, feeling that whole orchestra. And as you move around, like the cellos are different and you could just hear, and that will be coming, and that will be extraordinarily amazing. But I think going to an analog sound field is maybe a first step, just to remember what it's like, because most people listening to audio on like crappy headphones on their phone at like some kind of low bit rate streaming. So then you go, why is it important? And then when you do experience it, it's like, it's almost transcendental if you have a good band or good orchestra playing.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. There's I read about the Beacon Theater. They introduced an immersive sound system in their within the theater through a company called Holoplot from Germany. And they use some type of, I'm not really sure exactly how the tech works, but it's like a beamforming technology. So all of these speakers can gear the sound directly to the audience's ears, no matter their location within the theater. So
I want to describe another use of sound field that maybe not expected, and it's in games, and I would say like horror and sort of like more filmic experiences. In early tests we did, we brought in a very well-known film director, and I'll describe the experience this way. You were in this big room by yourself, and in a real physical room. So in the physical room, there was like a table, like a coffee table, And it didn't look like there was much in the room, but it was like cluttered and kind of full of junk. And in the upper corner of the room, you suddenly saw like a nice sized spider, maybe the size of a medium-sized dog, kind of crawling from the upper part of the corner. It was just walking quietly, and it was casting shadows on the room. And it was all the rendering was on this one thing. So it was only physical room and like super, very realistic, like cinema rendered spider. And it's walking around, and then it like kind of makes its way up on the coffee table in the middle of the room, and then it makes eye contact with you, because we know where your head is and we know where your eyes are. So you go from like some kind of nature observing thing to suddenly you're transfixed by the fact that this thing is staring at you. And then it launches itself from the coffee table at your face at really high speed. And as it's doing it, it's screaming. And the sound field is screaming from the middle of the room into the middle of your head. And like, as that sound moves, your body almost pre-creates like the haptics, which I thought was super weird. Like you felt like you were being punched in the face, because this big thing, which looks like it weighs like 20, 30 pounds, is flying at you, and your body like pre-configures as if you're about to get hit. And you begin to feel the punch. And as the sound enters your body, your muscles convulse. And it basically, like, I learned that really good visuals and really good sound field can induce haptics. And that was kind of weird. The idea that haptics is something that like, your brain can create that feeling of touch. And if two of the senses are just very dialed in, we had this happen a number of times. Like the idea that haptics could be this like neurologically derived experience, maybe with like a little bit of extra, instead of having to have these like big mechanisms, but like your body would actually create some of the haptic push. We first saw that with the spider, and we tested with other things like with like creating fire. People thought it was warm and all kinds of stuff like that. So it was kind of weird that you wouldn't automatically expect sound, and sound plus a good visual blended together might create the third sense. But that was an eye opener.
How was that recorded? How did you record for that experience?
The spider thing?
Yeah, the audio.
Yeah, people were terrified of it to the point where they wouldn't go to the room, and we have to stop showing it. The other really creepy thing we did was we built a ghost, like a girl who looked like a really scary ghost, like the head spinning and the eyes like going black, but a very realistic looking like kind of Spielberg-y poltergeisty thing. And with sound, you can hear her at the end of a hallway or something. And then the really creepy thing is suddenly she's talking inside your ear, like your right ear, and she's like right there. So if you see somebody down the hallway that's like floating a foot over a hallway, like in The Shining, and then all of a sudden like she disappears and you hear her talking inside your right ear, it's the most terrifying thing. I'm actually freaking myself out right now, but like that was something that sound field can do that a movie can't do. Like it actually put it in the, you know, in the back of the right ear or inside the left ear, suddenly behind you. And then you hear her like 30 feet down the hallway. And then you like that whole playing around, and then like something coming around the corner, like you hear the sound coming around the corner, and with like little glimpses of the visual was sort of terrifying. So I'm guessing like the, you know, experienced houses or things will eventually really learn how to tune it, and they'll kind of take horror and storytelling to like whole new places. But I mean, just that simple test of like, here's this poltergeisty Shining type girl floating the hallway. She disappears. Suddenly she's like in your right ear speaking quietly. Just totally terrifying.
That's super cool. Thank you for sharing.
Hopefully it doesn't give everyone nightmares, but like.
You're really freaking me out. I was a big Stephen King fan, but you're freaking me out.
Yeah, like Stephen King was meant to be.
I can see Drew Barrymore watching a TV with static, and that just scares me.
Yeah, the weird thing is the feeling of not being. I think what sound fields can do with visuals is like you're no longer safe. There's something that's behind the screen. You know, in a movie or television, ultimately you're safe. What's kind of creepy here is like you don't feel safe. The sound is coming down the hallway. It's in your head. It's in your chest. It's somewhere. And then if you add IoT, like that's really terrifying. We did these IoT experiments where like you'd hear something come down the hallway, you'd see it, turns the light off. Like, and then you really are living poltergeist, and that's quite different from, that's very quite different from watching it as a movie. I actually banned some of that stuff after. I'm like, this is gonna scare someone to death, so let's put that away for now. But some, you know, Guillermo del Toro of XR will arise and build the scariest stuff with what I just described. And I think horror is like the low-lying fruit, though. It's like you could do extraordinarily good horror with what's available later this year and what's coming out next year. It'll just be utterly terrifying.
Awesome. Thank you, Rony. And if you have any more questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll be happy to relay them over to Rony. And if you have questions for the previous speakers as well, feel free to add them as well. I see there's a discussion going on in the chat regarding apophenia, which I'm not familiar with, and synesthesia. So Ted's been bringing up these interesting topics. Thank you, Ted.
Can I mention one thing about synesthesia? Because we had a wonderful musician who had synesthesia, and she was always trying to communicate to people. And then we built like a little prototype of her synesthesia experience where as she would play, different colors of sound would appear. So we're like, well, where do they appear and what color, like, what does this chord or note do? Like, this is brown, and it kind of looks like this fuzzy thing. So kind of for the first time in her life, she was able to share like the idea that when she hears a sound, her brain visualizes these sort of like color things in space. And then when you put that on, you're like, oh, that's what it means to have synesthesia. Like you can actually experience this like blending of your senses where you hear the sound and suddenly that color, you know, as you went to a different chord, it might turn blue or brown. That was really interesting to see that happen.
Cool. And general question from TK, are you excited about Lamina 1?
Oh, I am. Like, first of all, it's just very cool and weird to be, you know, working with Neil on something like this, because he's, you know, he worked for me and he is also like one of the, you have to sort of separate someone working with you and for you from the fact that they're one of the great all-time science fiction writers. It's like Isaac Asimov, filling out Isaac Asimov's like lunch receipts. But it was very exciting that Neil decided to like get into the game in this new way and I think for all of you who are creative people to at least take a shot at mapping out what an open, creative, distributed metaverse can be like versus one that's controlled by an autocrat. I mean, I actually think of it as like pretty black and white decision making. There's going to be like monarchs who build metaverses and you live in their kingdom and work under their rules, or there's going to be like democratic ones that you're open and free. And that may affect a lot of your life. Like, do you go towards an autocratic way of life or to a more democratic way of life? And the metaverse, because it ties into so many physical and digital things of our life, will probably condition people one way or the other to be okay with autocratic rule or more open and more free. So I think it's pretty fundamental. I think it's why Neil wanted to come out and do this now.
Awesome. Ted wants to ask a clarifying question going back to synesthesia. Ted, if you feel free to ask the question if you'd like.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just really quick. So Rony, I remember magically there was an experience, I don't think it was released, but it was a goldfish that would eat out of your hand. And what I noticed is that when the goldfish would approach the hand, people's hand would twitch. When it went to get the food. I want to make sure it was, I know you've talked to more neurolinguists than I do. Would you call that synesthesia, or would you call that a different sense pattern?
I think it is a form of synesthesia, although, I mean, the reason I'm saying is that you're seeing, you got the visual sense, and you might have a little bit of sound of it, like, you know, swishing over, but then the twitch is you reacting to it. So I feel like what's happening is your brain is combining two. I saw it much more frequently when you've got two very well designed one. And that, by the way, the goldfish one was really cool. Like, it was tiny, so all the rendering power was on the goldfish. You swore it was like this just fish swimming around. And then you just felt like if a real fish was coming at your hand, you'd pull it back a little bit, and you'd kind of feel it. Your system, your neurologic system is sending tactile sense response. So I feel it is a form of synesthesia. I don't know if there's a neuroscientist on the call who wants to argue with us, but I have a cousin who's at Harvard who's a neurologist. So he and I have debated this for a long time. So I think I would say it is. I don't know what anyone else says.
Are advanced topics like synesthesia and other neurological discussions, do you find those to be important components of augmented reality experiences in the future? Is that something that group members should be looking into and considering?
I do, and I'll tell you why. Like, my background's biomedical engineering, and I come out of like designing med tech, surgical robotics, and things that go in the body. And I came at XR from that. I think there are all sorts of physiologic and neurologic responses. We're only scratching the surface today. And that what makes us very different from laptops, from you know, video game machines like an Xbox or PlayStation. This thing is a brain computer interface. It is interfacing with your eye-brain system in pretty intimate ways. And I don't know if every company and every person really thinks of it that way. But the more we realize it is a BCI and treat it that way, and have a lot of respect for what it takes to, you know, do the biomedical engineering to connect technology to your body in that way, and realize like all these unexpected effects could be happening. You're messing with the wiring of the brain. You have to be incredibly careful. So I feel like it's very powerful. You could use emotional, creative experiences that are beyond belief. And, you know, the phone with an AR is so different from what I'm describing, right? Like the things, as you go to that next level, you really do start to come much closer to BCI. And people who spend a lot of time in like good VR, good AR will know what I'm talking about. So I feel like it'd be good if developers were talking about it more, and they pushed the bigger companies more on things that they're not solving. They're more vocal about it. I think it's really important because, first of all, it's like map all the issues. Like, you know, not every company should have an understanding of it, and like the industry should coherently understand, like, we need to get vestibular mismatch solved. You got to get frame rates right. There's all these things so that you kind of have a good consensus. And this happened in the medical device world. Like if you've got a pacemaker put in, no company in America today is putting in a pacemaker not made with the right materials. You could argue about which one's a little bit better, but they're all biocompatible, they all mat. And that's not true in VR and AR. You have all sorts of scattering about like good and bad quality designs that have all kinds of different reactions on people. So anyway, that's how I'm passionate about it because of my background. But
just a few more questions that I'll ask and that we receive from the audience. But do you think the industry as a whole is looking to hire the wrong set of folks, perhaps?
I think the industry as a whole is split between a narrow group that actually understands what I'm talking about. Like this is a biomedical, biotech problem combined with computing, and treat it that way. And those are the most sophisticated players who are going to build the best things. And then
sure,
there's other groups who want to pretend it's just like designing another computer, and they want to ignore it because ignoring it makes it go away right now, because let's just pretend it's not there. And if you ignore it, it's going to be cheaper. We could just use off-the-shelf parts and economy of scale from you know, just existing mobile devices. So I feel like that won't really go though. If we want to get to the point where we have like daily use and we get to like 1 billion daily users by the end of the decade, I find that impossible to ignore a suite of these issues and for that to still be true. I think at least one of the big companies is attentive to it, and they have too much to lose. I won't name them, but like I think the fruit company won't ship unless they've dealt with a bunch of these things.
Mhm.
The other companies have shipped things and are just dealing with it at a series of like low grade complaints until they work on it, gets better and better, and like you'll just take it, it's fine, just it is what it is. And I think it's going to continuously improve, and I actually think it limits some people from getting involved at all, and they'll just stick to a phone or do AR by phone or something until it's really resolved, which means a lot of people miss out on some of the extraordinary things that are possible once you get it right.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rony, for joining. There's no further questions on the chat, but feel free if you wanted to add some additional topics, but otherwise it was really great having you on. Thank you.
There was somebody put something about epilepsy.
Oh,
Gonna deal
sorry,
with
I
that?
may have missed that.
I don't know if he's still on.
Yes, I'm Eric. Hi, Rony.
Sure.
I just remember I used to play video games in the 80s as a kid, and I wanted to build an AR headset back then, actually, interestingly enough. So, I mean, I remember always those warnings in the little Nintendo, game pamphlets that said epilepsy. So I never really thought of synesthesia, but I'm not really up to date with all the terminology myself, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, but I think your
Isn't it-
point on
is it-
epilepsy is correct.
So-
It still exists, I guess,
I mean, I have sorry to interrupt, but I have a son with epilepsy, so I don't know if it's okay. I apologize, Rony, but
Sure.
epilepsy is a known trigger for epilepsy, and when you have a kid or an adult, they want to test meds, they might wean you off or take you off the med to trigger a seizure or to get sort of a certain brain activity, and they will literally stick a strobe light in the eyes of the kid, and in hopes of triggering an epileptic seizure. Yeah, so it's a thing.
Yeah.
If that helps.
So if
Sorry.
you get surgery.
Thanks for the explanation, Barry. It's hard to like believe that when you don't have something, it's interesting to think about other people's shoes, But
No, of course. I mean, but that's what I talked to Andy about. I mean, that's the best application of AR if you could actually be in someone else's shoes, literally, and
exactly.
experience
That's what's
their
cool about
life.
AR. You can make the impossible possible.
Andy, maybe I'll close out with this because I do have a relative who has epilepsy. I have a cousin, and his brother is a PhD MD studying epilepsy and is a clinician and a PhD in epilepsy. So I know a little bit about it, but I actually think there's an interesting possibility of observing and treating epilepsy once there's like mass scale AR. So not VR. I think like poorly designed VR, like video game signals could trigger epilepsy. But if you have the right sensors on somebody, you might be able to actually track what's happening with them, like with their eyes, their pupils. There's all sorts of like little interesting biomarkers that an all day, everyday AR system could detect for the first time continuously over months or years that we just don't get. And also the whole environment around the person that could trigger something. So it'd be very interesting to see like this and that together cause something. And could we know that's about to happen and then inject a drug or do something to stop it? So I think, this is a 10-year out prediction, but I actually think like really good AR might be one of the pathways for gathering tons of data on like helping people with epilepsy. And it's actually quite exciting. I mean, it's a thesis, but I think you're going to have this amazing observational data about what's coming in your eyes, what's coming around you, what's the environment, and also what's happening with you. And then all that data can go to research labs. And I think that could lead to some really interesting new treatments. So, and it's one of the cool things about medical use cases for AR. But I actually think epilepsy is one of them, and hopefully some researchers pick that up and keep running with it. I know of a few who are, but.
Awesome. Appreciate your insight, Rony. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
That was great. Thank you, Andy and team, for having me here.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. Appreciate it. Have a good evening. Thanks again, Rony.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Y'all have a great one, everybody.
See you. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Happy New Year to those celebrating.
Thank you, Bart.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shuli.
I'm not.
Thank you.
Julie, are you going to be near your installation this week or next week? Would love to stop by.
Yeah, actually. So let's exchange emails, definitely. On the 23rd, I'm leading a group of AIA architects. That'll be on a Friday afternoon, like 3, but I'll email you, and everybody else who's interested, we can just put it up somewhere.
Yeah, that, you know what? I'll follow up with you an email. Would love to learn more about that. Okay.
Thank you so much.
That sounds
Good
great.
night.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Barry.
Yeah. Rony, it made me think of that company Neurable that is doing some research or making wearables for neurological conditions like epilepsy. So that, yeah, maybe we should bring them on. Yeah,
that would be great for sure.
Yeah, definitely a really interesting area of research. Really cool stuff.
Also, synesthesia is actually really interesting as well. I know. I think Duke Ellington had synesthesia. So.
Yeah, like when you play, like you can see, like you can hear, you can see sounds and mixing up all that stuff. I mean, without tripping, it's really cool.
Very cool.
Very nice. All right, thanks all.
All right, thanks guys.
Have a great one.
Everyone have a good night. Bye.